Hey there. Hi, I'm Psych Diva.
And I'm the apothecary.
This is Remedy Road. Buckle up, we're going for a ride.
Jump in.
So, so what are we talking about? What's our what kind of a road trip are we going on today, Carol?
Well, before we go there, we do have to give just a tiny bit of information, Lisa. It is not the intention of Remedy Road to provide specific medical advice, but rather to provide you with information to better understand health and wellness. As always, we recommend you consult a qualified medical provider for advice.
Yep, it's not our intention to replace any qualified medical provider for our listening audience. We're simply here to give you tips on how to improve your health and well-being going forward from this point on. And with that,
Well, today we're going to be looking at traditional medicine and mainstream medicine.
yep. And I'm going to be discussing the implications of the medicine that we know today and how that can affect our impact, how big pharma has played a big role in all of our lives. And I think we can all attest to, what we've experienced with big pharma lately. When you say, Carol?
Yep. We're going to get into some of the history behind all of that as well, because, from a
Mm-hmm.
historical perspective, you get a clearer understanding of what's going on today. And of course, we're going to have a natural health tip that will help everyone, especially those of you with COVID for the long
Long
haul.
haul.
But first,
Right.
let's take a look at at this week's health news.
There's a lot of it too, isn't there?
Yeah, there really is. Um, So, one thing that happened that affects nurses like Lisa and I, doctors, other healthcare professionals, was a Supreme Court decision. And it's interesting that what the Supreme Court had to say about their decision. They did kind of overturn the OSHA mandate, saying that, OSHA really isn't at play here. That doesn't really have anything to do with, constitutional law and so forth. But I think their wording was here. Let's just look it up. Okay, so requiring the vaccination of 84 million Americans selected simply because they work for employers with more than 100 employees certainly falls under the category of not being able to give that agency's power to regulate public health more broadly. Speaking of OSHA. And then Biden turned around and he called on the states and businesses to step up and voluntarily institute vaccination requirements to protect workers. Um, so basically, this is what the Supreme Court says, but this is what I want you to do instead, is kind of
Mm.
his take on it. So, but simultaneously, in a separate ruling on the administration's vaccines rules for healthcare workers, it was a 5-4 majority where they said that they agree with the government that Health and Human Services, the Secretary's rule falls within the authorities that Congress has conferred upon them. And they said that ensuring that providers take steps to avoid transmitting a dangerous virus to their patients is consistent with the fundamental principle of the medical profession of first do no harm. So it's basically working under the supposition that the vaccinations actually avoid transmitting.
Now, I have a
So we.
question. I have a question about that. Aren't we also hearing now in the same week that the vaccinated COVID positive symptomatic nurses are being instructed to proceed, go to work, do
Yeah.
your job, while we keep the unvaccinated, healthy, asymptomatic nurses away, fired,
Mhm.
terminated, resigned, what have you. They've been deemed as being a health hazard to the work environment. So, where do you see this going? I mean, are we looking at, a massive, I mean, I know there's already a shortage. Are we looking at an incredibly like massive shortage, or do you think that
Yeah.
nurses are finally going to say, hey, that's enough? I mean, are we going to band together? Are we going to flip this thing around? I don't think it's fair that it's been completely flipped on the burden of healthcare workers alone. I'm happy for the rest of, you know, the workforce in the United States, given the ruling. But again, that was not a win for healthcare workers, was it?
No, not at all. That wasn't a win. So basically, what we're looking at is there's going to be a faction of the healthcare workers that acquiesce as they did at the beginning, even whether they agreed with it or not, they're going to go
Mhm.
ahead and get jabbed. But there is a large number that are simply not going to do it. And if it means their termination, then they'll probably get terminated from their jobs. I think that they will honor the religious exemption. CMS has to honor that. That is constitutional, and they are a federal agency, so they're not going to get away with denying religious exemptions. It's very careful how it's very important that those exemptions be worded appropriately.
Just
That
so.
you can't throw in language about the Nuremberg trials or
No, no,
you're
that's not going
gonna
to
have
fly.
to no, you're gonna have to word these exemptions very carefully. And there's what's really nice is a lot of resources are out there on the internet right now to guide people in how to word those exemptions. I don't think we should have to request an exemption. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. They're denying a large portion of the population. Basically, they're estimating 10 million people are going to be that are employed in facilities that accept Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement. And so 10 million people are basically told, yeah, your bodily autonomy means nothing. And
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's that whole thing about, they have to take steps to avoid transmitting a dangerous virus. Tomorrow, Lisa, my assignment as part of my job is I'm to go into a nursing home. I'm supposed to go into this nursing home that is absolutely riddled with COVID. Like almost every patient and worker in there is currently COVID positive. I called there this afternoon, and they're still COVID positive. They tested everyone again today. They're not going to even test them again for 90 days. But I have to go into this place. It's riddled with COVID, right? So
Mhm.
who are we really trying to protect here?
Right.
Okay. Yeah,
Exactly.
because we know the vaccine's not going to protect. Now, I do agree with Judge Alito's take on this. He said, I do not think that the federal government is likely to be able to show that Congress has authorized the unprecedented step of compelling over 10 million healthcare workers to be vaccinated on pain of being fired. And I have to agree with him on that. I really think that there's going to be a fight. There are cases coming up from the lower courts. I don't know the expecting the Supreme Court to reverse itself is asking a lot, but I do think that there's going to be some backlash on this. I don't think it'll come in time to save everyone's jobs. Unfortunately, the wheels of the judicial system seem to turn rather slowly, don't they?
Yeah, they surely do. And I just want to throw up high prayers to all of our healthcare workers, brothers and sisters that are right here in the fighting pits of this arena. This is something that we've never seen before. It's
Mhm.
actually unprecedented. I'm going to say that. I'm tired of that word, but I'm going to say it anyway. It is
It's true.
unprecedented. And, we've got to find a way to really win this battle or
Yeah.
war. It seems like it's turned into a war at this point. The battle has raged on for so long, and now we're at the final count on all of it. So, I mean,
Right. Because
God will win. God is with us. He'll win.
if they win on this one, then they'll be able to mandate something else for someone else for the
It's
next one,
true.
the next one. I mean, what? Where does it end? Where will
It's
they
true.
not be able to mandate if you carry this trajectory? If you continue on this trajectory, they'll be able to mandate anything they want for anyone they want.
It's
Absolutely
true.
not. This has to stop now.
I agree.
What
I
else?
agree.
What else have we got in the news?
So we've also got some great health tips and some interesting information, as it turns out, regarding some data related to the pregnancies and the jab. And I mean, would you like to hear about that? What I've
Ah,
managed to dig up? And I have to give props to Texas Girl out of Twitter, because she posted this article and I said, what is this? I'm very interested. And boy, oh boy, this was some interesting news, let me tell you. So, I'm digging through all of this information and I'm really reading between the fine lines. And of course, I've got to pull it up. So give me just a moment here. Um, it's quite shocking, actually, what I was able to sort of extract out of this article that she posted, and I know she knows where I'm going with this, and it's quite scary, actually. So, I'll just give an excerpt, really sort of a summarization of it. Based on the study that was published regarding spontaneous abortion. And I want to be able to quote who the article was, and I know Texas Girl can grab me that information real quick, but I'm sort of buried in information right now. So regarding the study that was showing spontaneous abortion after vaccination, the authors claimed that 104 pregnancy losses divided by 827 pregnancies resulted in 12.6% pregnancy loss, which is within normal range. However, a professional cancer data analyst from Kaleidoscope Strategic Incorporated in Toronto and her colleagues pointed out in a letter to the New England Journal of Medicine that in tiny print below the table, there was a statement: a total of 700 participants received their first eligible dose in their third trimester. Since the definition of spontaneous abortion pertains to pregnancy loss under 20 weeks gestation, that meant that 700 women didn't belong in the denominator because they weren't vaccinated. They were already past the point of being able to have a spontaneous abortion. So properly read, the fraction changed from 104 over 827 to 104 out of 127 fetal demise. 81.9%. Hence, 82% pregnancy loss rate for the first trimester pregnancies. Scary statistics.
But that's
interestingly
how
hidden
they
data.
do it. That's how they do it. They manipulate numbers, and they'll throw out a cohort of the study group, and then they'll proclaim this if you add that cohort group back into the mix, it's like, hey, wait a minute, how come you
Completely
threw these
changes
people out of there? Yeah, because now it makes their drug look safe.
Yeah.
They do it all the time.
Yeah, and
That's the
I'm
thing.
seeing this in a lot of things that I'm taking almost a magnifying glass to a lot of studies lately, and really having to peel back to get where I want to be. There's a lot of obscured, blurred data that's pushed right out front, and you have to keep continually peeling it down to its finest layers to really get to the potatoes of it all. And when you uncover it, you're like, what's happening right now? What is going on? It's very scary. It's very concerning. And I'm frustrated. I quite honestly am. I'm frustrated, and I hope that more information will come to light regarding that particular matter right there, because that's a scary situation.
82%.
Yep. And so there's more on that, though. It says, so spontaneous abortion as pregnancy loss between 6 and 20 weeks, thereby excluding all losses in the first 5 weeks. Okay, so what we're talking about here is who was included in the study, who was excluded in the study, conveniently enough. So if a woman got vaccinated and then 3 weeks later she became pregnant, if she made it through the first 6 weeks of gestation without a miscarriage, she was included in the study. Whereas if a woman got vaccinated and then 3 weeks later got pregnant, but then 5 weeks later had a miscarriage, she was excluded.
Right. Because she's outside that window.
Bias. It's an obvious bias. Interestingly, how they're calculating their data, correct? So, so it says with all of this, we have public health agencies and scientists that are willing to manipulate their data to protect the pharmaceutical interests, which is another topic that we're going to explore later on in our road trip here, right, Carol?
Yeah, but just remember, this is not new.
No,
this has been going on for a long time.
It's not. We're just uncovering it like little archaeologists now.
We have other news that we can get to. There's a couple of marches coming up this weekend. On January 22nd, the March for Life, which is an annual event that it did not occur last year because of the pandemic. And the next day, on January the 23rd, Defeat the Mandates. So if you can get up to Washington, D.C. for either of those, that would be phantasmagorical. We have a couple of new drugs coming out, Lisa. Why don't you tell us about one of them?
Oh, lovely. So Paxlovid. Paxlovid is an antiviral, a very expensive one, I might add, that offers a lot of side effects. But you take a 5-day course and you may just survive COVID, or you may not take a 5-day course and you may still survive COVID. This medication, I'm not a big fan of it from what I'm reading, data-related information. There are a lot of notable adverse effects. There are a lot of notable drug-to-drug interactions. There are a lot of nasty little side effects that go along with taking these antivirals. And antivirals, just so everybody's aware, are antivirals like this, I should say, when we're doing kind of combination antiviral together to make a super antiviral. These are historically now being used over the last 40 years to manage HIV and AIDS patients. Paxlovid, everyone. Paxlovid. Carol, what about the other?
The other one's molnupiravir. Okay, so it was approved. Now, both of these drugs are only approved under the EUA. Where have we heard that before? Okay.
Right.
So molnupiravir, however, it was developed back in 2004 as an antiviral for use in Venezuelan equine encephalitis virus, VEEP. Equine, horses. They are taking a horse drug. I'm not making this up.
Wait a
I'm not
minute.
making this up. It's a horse drug that was developed in 2004. So, now remember, antiviral drugs do not differentiate between DNA and RNA and a virus. It just kind of goes in there and it napalms everything like a chemotherapy drug does. Okay. Now, I'm thinking that this may not be a real good idea because again, it's going to napalm DNA and RNA along with the virus.
Yep.
We have other ways to treat viruses. I'm not a fan of this one. This one also has a lot of drug-to-drug interactions and potential side effects. Not as many of the side effects, and especially over a short course like 5 days. But I am concerned about the drug-to-drug interactions. Now remember, the pharmaceutical industry does not test medications against your particular little regime of drugs, your regimen of drugs that you're taking. So if you're on 5, 6, 7, 12, I have patients on 14, 16, 18, 20 drugs, and then I throw one of these in the mix, we don't know. They're not testing against these combinations. They just
Is it the
don't.
catalyst? Yeah. Is it the catalyst for
No.
the all cause? Just, now we're going to have one chronic, thing lead to the sequelae, leads to this, leads to that. And we've seen that happen too many times in this sort of field of medicine that we're working in these
And
days,
it's
this
not
current
just
trends.
these drugs. Yeah, it's not
Mm-mm.
just these drugs. It's your blood pressure medicine, your diabetes medicine. It's all your medicines. They don't
Mm-hmm.
test them on human test subjects that are taking your particular combination of medicines. That doesn't happen. It's all
No.
you're the test subject. You become the test subject.
Carol, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just want to I want to just bring this into focus if I'm hearing this correctly. So what I heard you say was they've taken a horse medication and they've made it emergency use authorized for humans. But the human medication that's FDA approved for human use and they use it for animals is not safe. I got that right? I mean, should I be taking notes on this? I just want to make sure. Am I getting that? Am I picking up what you're dropping? Because I think I am,
I'm
and I'm a little
serious.
concerned.
I know, isn't that the craziest thing? I mean, like I said, you cannot make this stuff up.
Yeah,
That's
well,
what's happening.
considering everything else I'm seeing and hearing, and I think everybody else will agree, considering the complete flipped upside down, we're an upside down world. And so now we're like just used to it, just like we were for like 40 years of government. Like, we all knew they were crooks and liars, and now we're like, yeah, they're crooks and liars. And it's like, yeah, of course they're doing this. We're doing that same, all the alarm fatigue syndrome, like, yeah, whatever, another day. But we need to start pushing back.
Yeah, just I don't need their drug. We got some safer stuff that we can use.
Meh.
So, we have another news tidbit, and then we can move on from there. The medical license of Dr. Merrill Nass was suspended by the medical board in the state of Maine. She has been ordered to undergo a neurocognitive assessment for speaking the truth about the COVID-19 pandemic response. All right. She just happens to be Dr. Robert Malone's doctor, y'all.
No,
It doesn't have anything to do with
didn't
it right after the Joe Rogan
didn't
podcast, now does it?
didn't see that coming. Not at
I
all.
know, right? Now, I will say this. She did lie to a pharmacist in order to help somebody get HCQ. She did. So right now her license is suspended for 30 days. She hasn't like completely lost it, but that's could be where it's headed. It's funny though, if we're going to talk about the history of medicine, Um, um, oh, I can't even remember his name off the top
No
of it.
worries,
My,
but isn't it sad what it's come down to now? Because a
well,
doctor
it
wants to
is.
be able to freely practice and treat her patient the appropriate way she sees fit, because who knows that person better than this physician? And now she's being punished for having to do a workaround. And I'm not condoning lying. I am not condoning lying. But it feels like, you know, healthcare workers are otherwise honorable. Nurses are the most trusted profession. And I realize we're speaking of a doctor here, but to have this sort of moral compass where you want to see somebody well to the point where you're willing to have to manipulate a situation to make your patient get the medication that you see is going to help, because otherwise it's not going to happen through that particular pharmacy. So I don't think I don't know this person. I can't even make the assumption, but I think in my heart of hearts, and I think we can all agree, she was likely acting in best interest for her patient, and she took a big risk. And now she's unfortunately paying the price for it. But we've seen a lot worse things that just get sort of shaken off, like moms with kids in their trunks.
So, but we're talking about and the clincher, they're sending her for neuropsych eval.
Yeah, well, she can come see me.
So there was a doctor, I was trying to grasp for his name, it was Ignace Semmelweis. So this guy was back in Turkey back in the day, a long time ago. And he was concerned because what he was seeing is the maternity ward had a lot of women who had puerperal fever. It's a very, very serious infection that can lead to the mother's death. It's after birth, after
Mm-hmm.
you've given birth. And he was kind of watching this and looking at this, and he got very concerned. And so he proposed to his colleagues that they were taking the infection from one woman, and as they go to examine the next woman, they're carrying the infection from patient to patient in these wards. They didn't have private rooms back then, okay? There were these
Right.
wards with just beds next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And he was basically, completely just vilified. Like, it was heresy to even suggest that that there were germs on the doctor's hands that were infecting all the patients in the wards, and these women were all dying. So they had him committed to an insane asylum. He died there when he was 47 years old.
And that's very
And
sad,
now,
because quite likely, and I can't pronounce his name, what you just said. I did hear it, but I will not tell you what it was again, because I don't think I could ever.
Semmelweis,
Yeah,
Dr.
that.
Semmelweis.
He was likely the founder of infectious control, but instead paid a hard cost because he was vilified, because people rejected his truth without
Yeah.
without actually doing any sort of investigative work. And that sounds awfully familiar.
There are a lot of doctors and nurses that are being faced with the same thing right now because we're standing up and speaking the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So that is our health news for the week.
Yay. And I'm sure, well, as soon as we, open today's or tomorrow's news, we're going to see, 50 more things that we can probably talk about. And, you guys out there listening, if you ever find anything to share with us, please, if you think it's worth listening to and, discussing, and it's a strong suit, something you're passionate about that you think needs to be brought to light, let us know. Just like Texas Girl did. Thank you for that. I appreciate your help on that.
So now it's time for our road trip.
Woohoo! So let's see here. Where are we going? Where are we going
We're gonna
today?
we're gonna look at traditional versus mainstream medicine.
Yes.
So we're I call it traditional medicine. Historically, it's been called alternative medicine, but I really think that mainstream medicine is the alternative to me. It's like, well, if I can't, this doesn't work, then I might go check them out. But traditional medicine is ancient. Okay, this has been going on forever. I used to teach a biblical medicine class because the Bible does talk a lot about healing. And we can go back even into Greek medicine. We can talk about Hippocrates and his philosophies of medicine. We can, talk about all of these things that historically brought us to the place we're at right now. But we're going to save and do some of that as we go forward in future episodes. I will say this, though. Medicine has always been made of natural substances. We took what God put on the earth, and we found that it was good for healing. Um, And that started with food. I mean, it was Hippocrates that said, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food," meaning, the phytonutrients that we get from food. Those are the things that nourish our body, yes, but also heal our body. We're gonna introduce one of those to you today later
Hmm.
on, so I'm excited about that. But this until the turn of from going from the 18th to the, or, I'm sorry, from the 19th to the 20th century, up until that point in time, everything that we used for healing was found in nature. Um, we've used minerals, we used plant substances, and yes, some of it was a little weird. Okay, like they were using leeches for a while. I'm not, I don't go there. Okay,
But
there
they're
are some
doing it
things that,
still, though,
well,
right?
they do in some parts of the world. They do that, and then they also were using things like bloodletting, even like during the Revolutionary Civil War,
Right.
even in the United States. Not a good idea. Okay, so we have learned things as we've moved forward,
Hmm.
but one thing that was difficult throughout the centuries is for one culture to take and learn from another culture these healing practices that required a great deal of travel, which was arduous. We didn't have airplanes. Okay, you couldn't just get across the world in a matter of hours. Um, but cultures did share their knowledge and wisdom with each other. So just just keeping all of that in mind, I want to just kind of fast forward us to the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. What was happening in the United States at that time is that there were physicians, and they did use weird things like leeches and bloodletting. Okay, but they also were using natural substances. For example, that's the prior to 1900, 1900, they would use things like foxglove, the plant, to
What's that?
create. Well, it's a plant, and the flower from they were able to extract a substance from the plant that they turned into a medication called digitalis. Now is it familiar to you now, Lisa?
Yep. Now
Yeah.
I know where you're
So
going with that.
right. So digitalis, it's not used as much nowadays, but when I was a young nurse, we were still using digitalis quite a bit in the treatment of different types of heart diseases. Aspirin. Aspirin was taken from the bark of the white willow tree. And so that was already in place. We did use cocaine medicinally for pain
Hmm.
control.
Hmm.
There were, and that comes from the cacao plant. Okay, so we were using things and making medicines out of them. There were also things being used, however, like homeopathy. So all of the medical schools in the United States at the turn of that century, um, were homeopathic medical schools. So homeopathy has a really interesting history. I'm not going to go into detail, but it didn't really come into Western medicine until the Crimean War, and or I'm sorry, the Napoleonic Wars is when it was kind of discovered, brought out of folklore and kind of your shaman type healers, and was brought into more of the mainstream. And those were the medical schools that were present in the United States at that time. Well, an interesting thing happened. There was a family called Rockefeller. And old man Rockefeller was getting old, and his doctor was a homeopathic doctor, and so that was the medicine he used. However, he had this whipstart young son, JD Jr., who just, long story short, figured out that they could make medications actually out of petrochemicals. Specifically, cars were just coming in. Okay, so we were making gasoline, right? We had to have oil and lubricants and stuff like that. So oil became a big deal in our country. And but once they were refined their gasoline and their oil for use in automobiles and different other kinds of engines too, right? They had to lubricate parts on trains and things like that. Oil was a big deal. The byproducts of that, they discovered, could be used to make medication, to go, that they could administer to people for various types of ailments. So when I talk about petrochemical pharmaceuticals, that's exactly what it is. These pharmaceuticals, these are synthetic drugs. Most of them are derived from petrochemicals as a base. Okay. So mostly what your medication is made out of. Now, some of it's
Oh,
not, antibiotics and different things like that aren't necessarily, but a lot of the chemicals that are in the drugs that we take are made from the byproducts of the petrochemical manufacturing process. So that was a big deal back then. The oil barons were loving that, and so they partnered up with the Rockefellers, and that's how the pharmaceutical industry basically started. Now, what was interesting is that they saw all of these homeopathic medical schools as competition. Like, well, so they got rid of all but three. They left a few because old man Rockefeller loved his homeopathic doctor and his homeopathic remedies, so they left three of them standing, but they took over the rest of them, and the AMA was formed, and the AMA, basically they got everybody together to write the curricula for this new type of medical doctor. And that's the birth of the pharmaceutical industry. So over time, pharmaceuticals have advanced and progressed, and there's a jillions and jillions of them. I'm telling you, there's so many. It's hard to keep up, even with the really common ones. Keeping up with, you got your trade name, Lasix. Now you got to know the generic name, furosemide. I mean, we got 2 and 3 names and stuff to play with all these medications. It's difficult. Most of you are taking medications you can't even pronounce the names of, or your parents are if
true.
you're not. Even
It's so true.
Tylenol. Yeah, even Tylenol. They sell the generic right next to it, but a lot of people can't even pronounce it, right? But we're giving it to our babies and we can't even pronounce it, much less know what's in it. So, one of the problems with the pharmaceuticals, though, is that they also had to bring in the FDA. It was called something else back then, but later changed to the FDA when they incorporated food in with it. Okay, so now we got the same people regulating drugs are supposed to be regulating food. They're regulating both of these industries, food and drugs, which is, I think, extremely interesting. I've just things that make you go, but
Hmm.
everybody accepts it. The Food and Drug Administration. Meanwhile, I'm not going to get into, well, maybe I should get into it, but I won't get into how people who are employed at the FDA later on get these fancy jobs in the drug companies. It really is. It's a stepstone to go from you hire in at the FDA, they can never fire you. And if you
Hmm.
work your way up and you're a good boy and or a good girl, and you do things the way that the pharmaceutical industry really likes, you can advance and you can go work for them for 6 figures. Whereas over here, you're stuck at your $55,000 a year government job, right? So
Uh,
that's a big incentive. CDC does the same thing. They do the same thing. So, with all of that, advancing, I'm going to tell you, we have created some amazing drugs that can totally save lives. Lisa, you've been in a crash cart in the emergency room. You've looked in there. What have we got in there?
oh boy, oh boy. We've got all kinds of fun stuff. We've got epinephrine. Epinephrine is to get that heart going again. We've got, oh gosh, we've got adenosine. We've got beta blockers. We've got neutralizing agents. We've got everything that you can pretty much think of. Nitrostatin.
And what are
Let's
what
see,
are all of those things geared?
morphine.
The things that are in the crash cart specifically,
Mhm.
what are they all designed to do?
Every single one of those medications are designed to save our lives. They're meant to
Yeah.
save our lives. They're meant to, reverse whatever has taken place that's put you in this position you've found where you're lying on a hospital stretcher or an EMS stretcher, and you're getting either compressions on your chest or in your lungs. So,
Yeah, you're
you're either
dying.
being you're dying. You're literally dying,
Mhm.
and this is now designed to work rapidly to sort of reverse or correct any imbalances that have taken place metabolically speaking, to sort of pull you back from the grips
Of
and get you
death.
sort of death. Yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah.
got drugs in that crash cart that will totally jumpstart your heart. you know, so we've got some really great
Yeah, we've got
advancements, and I
suppressors.
and I
Yeah.
and I always say that the emergency room, emergency medicine is one of one of the fields of medicine that I am totally on board with. We can save lives in that
Right.
emergency room. We can do that, okay? Um, but then we've got antibiotics, okay? They've been very useful. The overprescribing of antibiotics, however, has caused some real problems, like these
Hmm.
superbugs that we have no way to treat.
Yeah.
So, always hesitate before accepting an antibiotic prescription and figure out, do I really need to do this? Because it can create superbugs even inside your body, like MRSA. So,
Hang on one second right there. I want to veer off on something real quick because I found this to be quite fascinating. Geographically speaking, different areas of our country have more of a resistance to these
mhm,
antibiotics that treat certain things versus the other half. And you can almost see it coastally different, East Coast versus West Coast, North versus South is what we're looking at when we're looking at the frequently used antibiotics that target urinary tract infections, venereal diseases, and upper respiratory infections or ARIs. Bacterial infections of the respiratory system, genitourinary system, GI system. Because why does that happen, Carol? Is it because people like to share their antibiotics because they didn't finish their prescription all the way like they were supposed to? And we sort of, I don't think that has anything to do with it at all. I'm lying. But yeah. Anyways. Sorry, I didn't
I
want to
don't know.
interrupt. Go ahead. I hope I didn't lose you in your place.
No, that's good. But so antibiotics have been very useful over the years. We do have medications that can stabilize a person, like blood pressure medications and diabetic medications that can get a person stable. Um, so there's a lot of useful drugs out there that I have no problem with those. Here's where I have a problem is when they put you on these medications to stabilize you and they tell you, no, you're going to be on this for the rest of your life. That's where I'm like, wait a minute. You're not going to actually treat the problem. You're just going to manage the symptoms. There is a difference
Mhm.
between treating a problem and managing symptoms. And that is where our mainstream medicine has failed us. Okay. I want to talk about
Yeah.
a few other successes, though, Lisa. Another success with mainstream medicine that I have actually watched evolve over the years is diagnostics. When I was a young nurse, there were no CAT scan machines, and that came in before the MRI machines.
Those are
That's
big
how
money
long I've been a
makers.
nurse.
Those are
Yeah,
big money makers.
they are, but they have been very successful in being able to diagnose things that we used to have to do
True.
exploratory surgery to figure out what the problem was. Now we can do a lot
Mhm.
of scanning and not have to be so invasive. So
Yeah.
that's been a good success. Lots of other laboratory tests, blood tests that we've been able to develop that I think have been very, very useful. So diagnostics is an area that I think that mainstream medicine has been successful in. Neonatal intensive care. I started my career in newborn nursery and labor and delivery when I was 17. I just turned 17 years old when I got a little job as a unit secretary back in the L&D in the nursery. I delivered my first baby when I was 18. The nurses were teaching me. Let me tell you something. It was a hospital that had just opened. The nurses were bored, and I was a child, and they were pumping all kinds of goodness into my head. But back then, a baby under 5 pounds was, I mean, that was a little sketchy, but under 3 pounds, no. We prayed over the baby and shipped it out, and they really just didn't make it.
And what a
So,
difference today on that, Carol. Now
yeah,
we're seeing babies born at a pound and a half. And, it's still a dicey situation, but
it
it's
is.
not an immediate write off. You're going,
Yeah,
okay, well, there's a lot of different interventions, which now to double back on that with the laboratory and diagnostics and the pharmaceuticals, how far we've come and how effective they've been for, in times of need, they
yeah,
have their place, but there's also now the overutilization of it, which is why we've got this astronomical number, this figure of what is spent on healthcare annually in the United States. It's incredible, those figures. And you guys can, more than free to go look them up, but it doesn't show signs of stopping, is what I'll say. And that is probably, again, going back to where you began with the Industrial Revolution, and they said, hey, wait a minute, we can make some money here. So thus the marketing began, right? So
right. The fourth area of medicine that's been really, really great is surgical intervention. When I was a young nurse, when they did a cholecystectomy, basically they take your gallbladder out, right? I mean, they cut you stem to stern, and you had these great big rubber retention sutures about that long to hold you
Mm,
back together after your gallbladder's taken out. Now your incision is like this. It's all microscopic. They're doing tons of microscopic surgery. They don't have to slice your leg half open to operate on your knee. They can go in 5 different little pinpoints and completely replace the knee. I'm like, how do you get the parts in there with these tiny
right.
little, you know? I mean, it's amazing the surgical interventions that we've been able to,
Yep.
advance into. It's just amazing.
Yep.
I would love to see how that
Yeah. So we've
progresses
got
and
the
where we go from there.
robotics. We've got the
Yeah,
robotics. We've got
that makes me nervous.
interventional, the fluoroscopy guided surgical intervention. You've got, interventional radiology, the robotics. You've got that's advancing just over time, year by year. We've seen like so many advances where it started out with, sort of just one little specialty, and they said, hey, this has been really successful, and we've sort of moved into several other specialties now as a result of robotics, because it's so sort of, it knows exactly where you're going. You're plugging in these sort of these numbers and like a diagram, almost like you're going on a boat. You've got your markers there, and it's saying go directly right there based on that anatomical scan that we just did. It's quite fascinating how advanced it has become, but there
And
are
then not,
a lot of
and we
areas
could
of improvement needed.
we can lump in there the whole transplant, organ transplant thing. Amazing. Like they were not doing that when I was a young nurse. There's no way. And now they are.
Hey,
Um,
speaking of which, that's one more news item that we should have covered. The pig transplant that we just heard about, the gentleman who received a pig heart transplant. How I'm not sure. I didn't put a whole lot of thought into that, just simply because there's so many other things going on, but still something to marvel at. Like, really?
something for us to follow, and we can come
For
back at
sure.
that story
For sure. For
again.
sure.
So that was for, what was my fifth one? Oh, I see, intensive care. And we both worked in intensive care units, and being able to keep somebody alive. Yeah, we use machines. We got a bank of machines. I remember working ICU as a young nurse, and I mean, we had like a couple of machines. Now you look at the wall behind the patient, and it looks like, a rocket ship dashboard or something, all these controls and the lights and the numbers and all this stuff going on. So being able to monitor them so closely and so intensely, and being able to act if there's a problem. So intensive care has come a long way too. Those are the only 5 areas of medicine that I've been able to really put my stamp of approval and say, yeah, we get a gold star there. The rest of
Yeah.
it's a little sketchy.
Yeah. When we've started, where did we begin? We had general practitioners. And, from this, we've sort of steamrolled and we started developing all these sort of specialties. And now we're known as parts: the belly, the arm, the heart, the brain, and you can break it down even further than that. If you look at cardiology, you've got the plumbers and you've got the electricians. And when I say that, I'm referring to the vascular cardiologist or the electrophysiologist, who's
Hmm.
looking at how the electrics of the heart work, who's looking at how the vasculature works. So there's a divided specialty where that is concerned. Well, and there are a few cardiologists that can sort of go back and forth on both, but you know, it is often to a benefit to a lot of patients who are having some sort of a sinus issue that's gone on to see an electrophysiologist versus somebody who's got some sort of an obstruction of a vessel, an occlusion, or they're having some real stenosing vessels. That's when you'll go see your vascular cardiologist. So we break those specialties out even further, and some of them sort of overlap, right? We've got the genitourinary overlaps with GYN, but yet they're separate and together with
And
OB.
and but then here comes the urologist with all his terps.
Yeah, everybody's had a chirp. So yeah, medicine has made some significant advancements. But it's actually sad at the same time, because why are doctors being cornered the way they are right now with what we're seeing? Like, what gives here? I thought these were respected professions. how can you continue to be a respected profession when you're not advocating for your patient any longer, but you're sort of doing whatever your your slave master tells you what to do? I'm not even going to hold back on that one because that's what it looks like to me. Somebody is
Mhm.
somebody's literally calling the shots over your head. And who is that person? Is that the American Medical Association?
No. So that all evolved during my lifetime. As a young nurse, every doctor had a private practice. He might have partners. Some doctors worked for like government clinics, maybe like the county clinic or a state clinic or state hospital, but doctors weren't typically employed by hospitals, and that changed. Along with that, or probably, yeah, probably simultaneously with that, or maybe just right behind it, most hospitals were either owned by a state, the county, or a church group.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't a lot of private hospitals at all. There was one in every major city that I knew of, but only one. So a lot of that shifted when hospitals were bought by big corporations, and it was very difficult. They put their own doctors in there, and so it squeezed out the doctors with the private practices, and they had to figure out how to survive because the hospitals were employing their own doctors. So that's how that shift came about. And as a doctor hires on to work for a hospital or a clinic that's one of these big businesses that own patient care, basically
Mm-hmm.
they have to sign an agreement, and this agreement basically holds their feet to the fire on everything. They have to follow everything that they're told to do, on in every aspect of the practice. It becomes cookie cutter recipe. A lot of that, there's input from the insurance companies and Medicare and Medicaid, but a lot of those regulations, that recipe book, comes actually from the pharmaceutical industry. They write the rules.
That's right. But why do they get to write the rules? You know,
Yeah, because
why do they get to write the rules? Because of the big deep pockets, perhaps? Is that why?
yeah, well,
Yeah,
yeah,
big deep
and
pockets.
and so you can even scale back a little bit and look. A lot of the funding for the CDC and the FDA, like I think the FDA, I mean, it's a big number. Somewhere around 70% of their funding comes from the pharmaceutical industry. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
CDC, a lot of the uh, clinical studies are funded by the pharmaceutical industry. So they're paying for somebody
Mm-hmm.
to check out their drug, and it's a lot of, and they're paying a lot of money for this. Okay, so you don't, you know, I mean, the CDC, they do these studies for them, and
That's not
and
bias.
it's
That's not bias. Not at all. There's no bias in that.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, none. The big medical journals, Journal of American Medical Association, New England Journal of Medicine, are the two big ones here in the United States. You got the Lancet and British Medical Journal over across the pond. I don't know how their journals are funded, but in the United States, a big chunk, like more than half of the funding, comes from the advertising in those journals, which are pharmaceutical ads. Look
Mm-hmm.
at just watch TV. 70% in a
Yeah.
non-election year. Okay, so during a general election year, the numbers shift, but during a non-general election year, it's 70% of mainstream media. Their funding comes from the pharmaceutical industry. Count the commercials, and the pharmaceutical, and if they want that time slot, but Coca-Cola or someone else owns it, has that time slot, they'll bump up how much they'll pay. That's why so much of it comes from them.
And that
Yeah.
sort of became a stranglehold over that whole entire industry as well. You know,
Hmm.
who's got the deeper pockets? And Big Pharma sort of has come over now and they've cornered every industry, and it gets right into the nitty gritty of where we are right now in the
Yeah.
current political state. The DC lobbyists, I mean, they lobby these politicians with their funding.
Hmm.
I mean, and
So
it's sad. That's who's dictating it right now. Big Pharma owns the globe when it
yeah,
comes down to it. They run the
so
entire globe.
yeah, gas and oil, that have a lot of money, and they have a lot of lobbyists in DC,
Hmm.
a lot. But the pharmaceutical industry has 7 times more lobbyists than gas and oil.
Yeah. So
I mean,
much of
they're
the funding
everywhere.
for the American Medical Association does come from big pharma as
Hmm.
well. They're kind of
Hmm.
everywhere. They've got their grip on everything. And the sad
Yeah.
part is you and I anybody here can easily go look up the benefits of vitamin D, and you're going to get 7 ads and articles of that it's not FDA approved, and it's not really studied well enough, and we just don't know enough about it, enough to sort of like
Hmm.
push people away. Give me something that's prescribed, that you trust, and that you've done all your studies on, that are biased and paid for by big pharma.
Yeah.
And that's why
Because
we ended up in the situation we're in right now with
hmm
yeah, let me see. What was it? 2015 to 2018, we had 45.8% of the US population on at least one pharmaceutical. And even now in 2021, more than 131 million people, or 66% of
hmm
adults in the United States, use prescription drugs.
yeah,
Uh,
at least
in
two.
in 2020, pharmaceutical companies saw a whopping 851 billion, not million, billion in sales. 851 billion. That's that's scary. And what's even scarier is, you know, I'm constantly on this sort of correction road, day in and day out, with patients, sort of pump the brakes. We're not going to go that far, like, and I'm thankful when I've got people that are actually hesitant, and I make a suggestion, and it's one that's obviously indicated, but when they sort of go, uh, I'm like, oh, I like this person. I'm going to go ahead and start talking nutraceuticals to you, because I feel like that's where we're going. And they're so thankful about it. So it gives me hope that there are people still interested, which is why we come here today and every Monday to show up and provide this information. So now I guess, what do we need to do now?
I
Are
want
we
to.
going
I have a.
to
Yeah,
go?
we can. We.
Do your
I have a
thing.
fun fact. When we go back
Tell
to the
us.
turn of the, going back to the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, when the Rockefellers were building their medicine men, getting their medicine and their medicine men in place, John Jr. had a partner. And this partner, I'm telling you, just reading in the history of how they did this and all of the details and the nuances, what went. I mean, they were working with J.P. Morgan and all of these big players back then. The railroad industry somehow got caught up in some of the decision making. I mean, this was a big deal back then. But he had this partner, and I'm telling you, he could not have done it without this guy. Was a little bit slimy. His name was Frederick Gates.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
He's the grandfather of
Hmm.
Bill Gates.
Hmm.
Yeah. Isn't that
This is my
amazing?
not shocked face.
What's funny is when I read that in a history book, this guy's name, Frederick Gates, and I thought, well, could it be? Because by that time, I was well aware of Bill Gates, fingers in vaccination program, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all that stuff. I was very aware of what was going on there. And I thought, could it be? And so I got on the internet and I dug and I dug and I even got a subscription, bought a 1 month subscription to like Ancestry.com and some of the others just to dig it. And I could not make the connection. Every Bill Gates family tree had his mother's family all fleshed out, but his dad's family didn't even have his dad's name. Not even his father's name, which we know is William Sr., but like that
Hmm.
whole thing was blank. And it wasn't until I got onto Twitter a few years ago that someone posted something and I went, what? And I followed the link, which took me to another link, so it took me, and I found
Breadcrumbs.
it.
I love breadcrumbs.
I
They're
was
my
just like,
favorite.
I know. It's like I knew it, but I couldn't
Like,
prove it.
bazinga! Bazinga! I found it, the missing link.
Yep.
Well, we all
So,
know about Bill Gates.
yeah. So that's kind of our road trip, is just to kind of take you guys down the little path of looking at, our pharmaceuticals, our mainstream medicine, the good, because there is much good. Okay. And then the not so good, which is our chronic health care. Every chronic disease you can name, they're not doing it right. They're just not doing it right. So, and for the last 2 years, they haven't done a whole heck of a lot right, have they, Lisa?
Speaking of which, and listen, here's the thing. I've completely disengaged from anything television, and I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have time, and B, I have no interest. But I do remember, a few years ago seeing these pharmaceutical ads, and it was like, they show this happy little scene with, people that have, sort of experienced depression, and now they're like playing out in the sunshine with their grandson, and they're kicking a
The
soccer ball,
butterflies.
and the butterflies and the blue skies and the hair and the wind in the hair, and it's like, you've turned a corner in life, but all of that lasts like 3 minutes. But what lasts the longest in the commercial? The side effects walk out. And it's so
This
funny because it's
medication, this medication
right.
could result in bleeding from your eyes and your tits falling off and your ears turning purple and all of these. They're just going
Right.
on and on and on,
They just
or death,
death, sudden death, death, death. But
death.
what's even, yeah. So and it's not funny. I want to say it's funny, but that's a horrible expression to use right now.
Well,
The interesting thing is, it's almost exactly true as how the medication will work. For, a little while you'll feel great, but for a long while you're just going to experience one side effect leads to the next. Now I need another drug. Now I need another
yeah,
drug. Now I need another
yeah.
drug. And compound or confound all of these side effects from all of these different pharmaceuticals. I mean, it only makes sense to go, let's do an exploration into what I can naturally use that has limited side effects, if any at all, that's actually going to promote overall health wellness for the long haul versus, sure, I'll take some heartburn, sure, I'll have some nausea, some diarrhea, a headache, migraines, dizziness. Why not? I love all that stuff. Tremors, cool. Sign me up. I love it. Heart palpitations, insomnia. Yes, give me insomnia. I want all of it. It's scary.
And a drug for each one. I am not exaggerating when I say
It's
that I will
true.
go into a patient's house and they have 30 bottles, 20 of them, 22 of them are the orange ones with the prescription label.
Hmm.
The others might be, uh, one a day for men. Like that. If you're going to do a multivitamin, we can do better than that. But why
Right?
bother at this point with all this other
Right.
stuff? Just take your one a day. It's like I'm going to say a
Hmm.
prayer over you. That's all I can do. Yeah, it gets really bad.
But the sad part is I'm seeing something happen in this society, and it only makes sense now when we look at those statistics with what big pharma's, the revenue that they're generating, and the way our society has sort of become that comfort convenience. I remember that will be always your thing, Carol. Comfort and convenience. I cannot get away from it. But you know, our society has almost grown addicted to, oh gosh, I have an ailment, I got to go get a prescription. I have
Hmm.
seen it time and time again, even when you spend so much time educating them and explaining to them that the majority of the symptoms you're having right now are all related to all the crap that you're taking that you shouldn't be taking, and your body's like, help me, fix me.
Exactly.
Right. And they're still like, well, maybe I should go get a med for that. And you could see
Well,
the
it's not
person
just.
till you're blue in the face. They just want that prescription med.
Mhm.
It's
And
ingrained in them, and
yeah,
it's
and
scary.
it's not even prescription. I mean, look at the aisles in the drugstore of over the counter
Over the
stuff.
counters.
And
Yeah.
you can have 10 different kinds of Benadryl. It's like, okay, all this stuff. And what they don't realize is taking that stuff chronically is going to take you to the prescription stuff.
That's right.
And that's
That's
going to
right.
take you to another prescription stuff.
Funny,
Yeah.
funny point to make on that too. And let me just make this real quick. So oftentimes, rather than, I've got a lot of patients in mental health that can't sleep. They have insomnia. So my natural knee jerk is melatonin. But I have to consistently
Mhm.
tell people, you can't just take it one and done. This is every night, every night, every night. We've got to restore the adequate levels of melatonin in your brain. And then on top of that, it's like magnesium. Well, it doesn't matter what time you take it, just make sure you're getting adequate levels of it. Oh, but my doctor told me about this really great supplement. And I'm like, what's the active metabolite? They're like, I don't know. And I go, let me check into that for you. Oh, it looks like magnesium and melatonin. Hmm. That's weird.
Exactly. Well, and but you can throw all the melatonin, magnesium, whatever you want to, because that's what people want. What I need, what can I take? What can I take? What can I take?
Mhm.
But we have to get back to the basics of sleep hygiene. Believe me, people, we're going to have an entire episode on
Yes,
sleep.
we are. Yes, we are. And I am looking forward to that one. I love it. I love it. I live it. I hear it every day. I'm on like radio repeat. I should just do a recording of myself so that I can just like, skip out and go grab an extra, glass of water or a potty break during my work day. So I can, I repeat myself on that often, often. So I love it. I'm glad I'm looking forward to that one. That'll be a great
Yeah,
show.
that's going to be a really good one. So, we've got some driving tips for y'all.
Woo! I am excited about that.
Yep, in our remedy of the week. So, Lisa,
Cruciforms. I know you guys are going to love
cruciforms.
to hear about this.
They're like cruciforms. That
What
doesn't
are
sound good.
cruciforms? I know, and it's everybody's favorite food to hate.
Yep.
We've got some suggestions to work around that though. Things that can
Yes,
be
we do.
worked around. Why are cruciforms important?
I don't know.
Do you want me to
Well,
tell
why
you
are
why
they
they're important?
important? Oh, I
Yeah.
know why they're important. What I thought you were going to ask, why are they so hated? That I don't know. But
Well, you tell me that. You can tell me why they're so hated. Tell me why they're so hated.
well, because here's my theory on it. Okay, these are the vegetables that your mother said eat your vegetables, but I mean, in in my age category, the boomers, all right, and even a little after the boomers, your mom would say, eat your vegetables. Well, she was opening a can, dumping it on your plate, and saying, eat your vegetables. And yeah, no, no, that was just gross. Okay. So our parents, the boomers' parents, those things came fresh from the garden and grandma gussied them up and they were delicious. But for the boomers, our parents opened a can. Okay, this is kind of post World War II here. Okay,
Uh,
opened a can, and this is when cans were actually in cans. Before that they were canning vegetables in the house, putting them in glass jars. Well, now they're putting them in. It used to be tin cans. Now we got aluminum. They're opening the cans. They're dumping them on your plate. They might heat them up. Say, eat your vegetables. Gross. They were
well,
gross. People are introduced to vegetables in ways that just don't taste very good at all. But I'm telling you, I have got some just incredible experiences with vegetables that I really wasn't too keen on. I mean, and
well,
they're fantastic. They're fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
I can completely understand now why people would not like their vegetables. I didn't have to experience that, but if anybody else did, like Carol, no wonder we've got such a deficiency in the catecholamines and the
Right.
sulfuramines and things like that.
So my
I love
so
those
my
little.
gener
Go
and
ahead.
my generation grew up going, oh, that asparagus, that's slimy. Wow, well, she dumped it out of a can. So did we love asparagus enough to teach our children to love asparagus? No.
Mm-mm.
And now our children aren't teaching their children to love it either. I mean, once
Right.
you learn how to cook something, and oh, the recipes that are out there, girls, it's
Hmm.
just amazing. Amazing.
So
So
let's
let's
talk
let's
about let's talk about the cruciforms then, Carol. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut right over you. I guess we're on the same page here. Well, we are in the same car, so
yeah.
cruciforms. I'll tell you guys. From my point of view, and I'm gonna talk about the benefits of the brain and how it can optimize your thought process, your brain function. Um, so we've got these sort of neurotrophic factors or amines, catecholamines, everything that makes up the process of how our neurotransmitters function, how we fire on all cylinders, how we get our engine started and move and really get the gas going, rather than just sort of like pumping along on like fumes, which is what most people feel like most days now, especially our COVID long haulers, or oftentimes our the individuals that have been suffering or afflicted with autoimmune deficiencies, and or people that have had a lot of prescription medications that affect the brain and sort of, work on those neurotransmitters, those neurotrophic factors, the BDNF, and it starts to deplete these things over time. And so you go, man, this medication used to work for me and it doesn't work anymore. And I don't know why. why can't I feel like I'm awake enough? And I'm feeling so foggy and run down. And I just feel like there's a word I'm thinking of and I can't quite come up with it. And it's right at the tip of my tongue. Wait, no, it's not. It's somewhere way back here. And I just can't seem to get to it. So we start looking at what the heck is going on here. That is your BDNF, your brain derived neurotrophic factor. This is essential. We need the catecholamines to fire up the engines. We need to optimize our performance of all of our neurotransmitters, every one of them. And that's going to include your norepinephrine, your noradrenaline, your serotonin, your GABA, your glutamate, which is the excitatory one. But when we start considering how these things work, we can actually dig pretty far into this. And we see a lot of studies now that are demonstrating some real positive effects with increasing the BDNF or restoring and replenishing it, how it works on mental health disorders such as schizophrenia, how it works on people with autoimmune diseases, how it works with people that are suffering from just cognitive fog. And I'm noticing now a trend here where I've seen sort of some studies on restoring myelination as well. And if we think of what myelination is, it's kind of this coating over your neurosynapses, and that starts to deteriorate often in autoimmune disorders. So when we think of Lou Gehrig's disease, when we think of MS, that's a big one, MS. MS patients do have a hard time, trying to stay awake and alert, frequently fatigued, and that seems to get worse over time, often exacerbated, with what once worked for me no longer does. So we go, well, what's going on? Oh, we're depleting our stores. It's using every little bit it's got available of the amines and sort of grabbing onto those and pulling them backwards in a sense. It's supposed to be helping, but really what's going on is you're sort of you're using every available last store you have. So now we need to restore, replenish, and replace. How do we do that? BDNF, we need to restore that. Food, our leafy greens, our cruciforms, cruciferous vegetables. And I love it. It's so easy because you can do so many things with these sulforaphane. Sulforaphane specifically is what's found in cruciforms, and that is the specific element that's restorative to that BDNF. So those are things that you'll want to sort of maybe think about as an option for restoring function to your cognitive. Carol, what the heck are you doing? Carol, what are you doing?
I'm translating. You're using a lot of big words.
I'm so sorry. I hope everybody's following, but I can certainly expand on this a little bit further and go really deep down if I want to. I'm trying to break it down as little as I can to make it make sense. But listen, here's what I did do. I went ahead and preemptively took a strike on this. And if you go to my Twitter feed, for those who follow, I do have a few links posted regarding these studies and the benefits of BDNF on the NT, which is the brain-derived neurotrophic factor on your brain. So, a lot of health benefits related to your brain process on how this works. And listen, guys, if you've got any family members that have lupus, that have MS, that have any sort of, autoimmune that's kind of pulling them back and leaving them exhausted, fatigued. Parkinson's is another one. Chronic fatigue syndrome, often
Huntington's.
A lot of them. Yep. Any autoimmune could be.
There's a lot.
And I'd love to see a test study, a trial done on our long hauler COVID, post-COVID patients that have all of these sort of cognitive fog issues going on. I'd love to see a study done with, giving them just a little bit of some cruciform extract over the course of, some measured amount of time and see where we end up. And I realize that's a subjective thing. So how do you study that? There's got to be some way to study that. And I think that we'd see some real positive results as it comes down to it. But Carol, why don't you go ahead and tell us about how to help the health benefits about your gut and how it might help that microbiome.
Well, real quick, let's even tell people what we're talking about when we're talking about cruciforms. Okay, so we're talking about veggies, specific types of veggies, though, not all. For example, tomatoes don't count. It's not really a vegetable. So Brussels sprouts,
Mm-mm.
broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, bok choy, radishes, turnips. We've got your rutabaga. And now we get into some weird ones like kohlrabi, watercress, curly kale. Let's see, do we have any more? Yeah, we've got Chinese broccoli. Well, lots of kinds of broccolis and cabbages. Arugula, choy sum, tatsoi. Now, some of these we don't find in this part of the world. Landcress, calette. I mean, you can just, you know, look it up. You got, just what is a cruciferous vegetable? But our main ones that we typically use in our country are going to be your Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, bok choy, lettuce,
Yeah.
turnips, watercress, kohlrabi, rutabaga. Those are kind of the ones that are more familiar to our culture.
So listen, next time you guys go to that baby shower or that next family gathering, don't pass that veggie tray up. You've got all the taken right there at your fingertips of your broccoli and your cauliflower, the stuff that's always left over on the plate of veggies. That's the best stuff.
You don't like it because you haven't had it cooked right. That's the problem.
That's correct. Throw some
But
bagel seasoning on it.
your body needs it. Your body wants it. And also, as in terms of gut health, these kinds of vegetables also have a prebiotic. And everybody's heard of probiotics, but people don't really know what prebiotics are. That is the fiber that's in these vegetables. Our body has to have that fiber. It feeds our little gut bacteria. It feeds the probiotic bacteria. Okay, that's what they eat. You want to kill those bacteria, keep eating sugar. It's going to kill your good bacteria and bring up the bacteria that they're not bad, but they get out of control. It gets them off balance. It gets them out of homeostasis. We're trying to always have homeostasis. Okay. So yeah, you need your cruciferous vegetables for sure, and they do have the phytonutrients that are needed to heal and cure all kinds of different diseases. Again, your phytonutrients, these are teeny tiny. There's not your vitamin A and your vitamin B. These are even smaller than that. Okay, there are even things like the minerals. Everyone talk about vitamins all day long. We've been talking about vitamin D for 2 years, so we're all vitamin D'd out. But we don't always talk about the other phytonutrients. We don't always talk about the minerals that are in our food. We have been talking about zinc.
Zinc is a good one. Zinc is a good one.
There are phytonutrients in these specific types of foods that you're really not going to find in other food sources.
I love me some broccoli and cauliflower, and so does my daughter. Do you know why? Because this kid wants to get on a roller coaster, and I told her the only way it's happening is if she eats that broccoli so she can grow tall enough. She's like, give me some broccoli. Give me all the broccoli.
I love it.
Mind tricks.
Well, now we're on the home stretch. I need to wrap it up, Lisa.
So we're gonna wrap it up.
And
let me see here. What I have to do my part here. Where are we at? So, woo boy. Thank you for taking
we need to take
a
look at we need to take a look at what else is going on for the Alpha Warrior Network this week. Tomorrow, Alpha
I was getting
himself,
there.
Alpha himself is bringing you a doubleheader this tomorrow, beginning at 6 p.m. Central Time. That's 4 p.m. Pacific. Yeah, Pacific.
You do that part.
I'm not 30-minute power. Yeah, he's got a 30-minute power interview scheduled with special guest Clay
Clark. This is going to be amazing. Amazing. Clay Clark. Oh.
I know, right? And then
I'm excited.
And then, me too. So what's going on for his show, his regular show at 9 p.m. Central, Lisa?
So his usual time will be a special guest, Lionheart, joins Alpha to pull back the curtain on human trafficking. This is a topic, and organ harvesting. This is a topic that, it's a hard one to really get into, but it's necessary. We've got to create the awareness. So this is going to be, critical and an amazing show that you guys will not want to miss at all. And then Wednesday.
Then on Wednesday at 8 p.m. 9 p.m. Central, that's 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. I'm getting better. It's Transnational, featuring Trans Splendor himself. He's going to be bringing hard-hitting commentary on world events, daring the haters and the debaters to bring the heat.
And they will. And he'll bring it right back. And then he'll blow them out of the airlock. I can't wait. And then on Thursday, join Summer and myself at 8 p.m. Central as we take another perspective on our show, a new perspective. So again, that was 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, and I do not know what time Pacific because I am not good with the time zones. 7 p.m. Y'all know, I don't know. I'm just not I'm not, I don't know. The time zone things, they freak me out a little bit. So, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Specifically Pacific. So
what's your topic? What's your topic for that one, Lisa?
So, thank you for reminding me. I guess that would have been silly to pass right over that. So this week we've got an amazing guest, Melissa. She's been on Alpha's show in the past, and she's going to be enlightening us with what's going on up in the amazingly freezing cold state of Minnesota these days. Wisconsin, Kenosha specifically, regarding the mask mandates and where she's at on that. So we're going to be doing a deep dive topic onto the mask mandates, our schools, and we're going to get a few different angles there. So we've got some surprises, some tricks up our sleeve.
That sounds like it's going to be a good one. A week from today, we'll be back to steer you towards strong immune health, revealing all the information that you should have been told for the last 2 years, but you weren't. We'll be bringing it on Remedy Road. It'll be same time, 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific time.
Very good. And I look forward to that. Get your writing pens and papers out. You're going to have a lot of great information to write down next Monday. And Carol, as always, it's been a pleasure, and it was lovely spending time with you this hour and discussing everything. So one last tip, broccoli sprout extracts. That's where your cruciforms are if you guys want to boost that BDNF. If you're not a big broccoli eater, that is.
Broccoli sprout extract. So an extract, you can put that in a smoothie.
Mm-hmm. That's right. You can find that at your local health food store or online. That's fine.
Nice.
All right then. It's been an amazing Monday.
Yeah, it has. Really good. Good job. So, but remember, until then, you only get one body, and you want to treat it better than you treat your car.
That's true.
So we will see you next week.
See you guys next Monday on Remedy Road. Join us right here, same time next week. Every Monday we'll be here for you guys. Take it easy.
Bye, Lisa.